It's Friday, October 13th. I'm Matt Harmon. Welcome to the Yahoo Fantasy Football Show. It is a hell of a day to talk ball, and joining me to do just that, no longer just recapping, doing a little previewing this time, it's Scott Pianowski. Scott, what's going on, buddy?
Not much. Excited. Week 6, back in the home base, and some fun games going. Some offenses waking up, some offenses that need to wake up, and we're going to try to figure all that out here today.
That is exactly right. Yeah, we have a lot to get into. A very interesting week 6. I already can't believe it's week 6. Time seems to be flying by here. So let's waste no more time. Let's get right into it here. If you're new, thanks for joining. Appreciate it. Little reminder about how this thing works on the weekly preview podcast, the Viewer's Guide episode. We go through the games you want to binge, stream, and skip. What does that mean? Games you want to binge. Those are like the shows you can't miss. You know, they're the play all your dudes in fantasy. Could be a very exciting game to watch, but pretty important for the playoff picture. The games you want to stream, those are the shows you're watching start to finish, but you're not like crushing it all in one weekend type of thing. We could try to pick our spots here, matchups, things like that. Maybe it's one team really dragging them into the stream category. And lastly, the games you want to skip, you don't even maybe need to watch these ones. These are kind of like those shows you're maybe leaning towards passing as well. Scott and I will obviously break down a couple of interesting, plays and interesting spots in these skip games, but by and large, they're not the best looking ones on a week, any given week sort of thing here. So, Scott, does that make sense?
Absolutely. Let's get into it.
With all that out of the way, perfect. Let's dive into the Week 6 Fantasy Football Viewer's Guide here, starting with the first game you want to binge. Seattle Seahawks at the Cincinnati Bengals. We got a nice 44.5 over-under here. Scott, the Seahawks are 2.5-point dogs going into Cincinnati. What do we think about this one here?
Yeah, the timing breaks right. We finally saw Cincinnati going at the efficiency level and at the pace, at the rate we expected last week. Jamar Chase has been getting peppered like crazy, even when they weren't playing good football. In Seattle, a little healthier, of course, off the bye, refreshed, good coaching staff. I like teams who are well coached off their bye. Usually come out with a good performance. We know Seattle has dangerous pieces in the passing game. What I'm looking for here, because, you're going to start Chase and Metcalf and Lockett and Kenneth Walker and that stuff. When does Jackson Smith and Jigba become something? Because some people have thought, should I drop this guy? I can't play him right now. We know those rookie receivers can be the slow developing stories. He obviously had first round pedigree, one of those great Ohio State receivers. Where are we at with this guy? Would you have the nerve to play him if you were in a pinch? We've seen a lot of underperformance and injuries at the wide receiver position. Obviously, it's a bye week season game, so some good players aren't available. What's the state of address of JSN?
I think, to steal one of your terms, you need kind of a prove it week from this guy before you play him. He is somebody I'd really try not to drop. I'd really try if I have these rookie receivers in general, but especially the first rounders. Quentin Johnston is another one coming off his bye who we'll talk about a little bit later. I'd really try to hang on to these guys because, like you said, slow developing position. They can be sort of that second half league winner. We've seen it. It's not going to work out for everybody. Let's keep that in mind, right? Some of these rookie receivers, it's going to take until their second. And sometimes, like we're seeing it with Nico Collins right now, is going to take to their third years for everything to sort of come together here. I think JSN could be one of those guys, right? Because here's the deal. He's just not going to beat out DK Metcalf, and he's just not going to beat out Tyler Lockett. Now, the thing is, he could be on the field a lot more than he has been to start the season. I think the biggest issue there is that, number one, and I've talked about this, trigger warning, blocking receiver stuff coming up here. This guy, Jake Bobo, undrafted free agent who ran like a 4.99. And I think he ran it in like some weather or whatever. He's probably faster than that. But he ran a 4.99 in his pro day. He's been like blocking as the big slot receiver here, which is taking snaps away from JSN. They're also using a lot of 12 personnel, which is taking the slot receiver completely off the field because of their tackle injuries. All that being said, Scott, this certainly could be a time to see, if it's a post-bye rookie bump situation here.
Look at Cincinnati. When T. Higgins didn't play last week, I thought it made sense to maybe give Tyler Boyd a shot, but it was Trenton Irwin who was more important to the Bengals last week than Boyd. Assuming Higgins needs to miss more time or injuries show up again. I mean, is there something deeper worth rostering in this Cincinnati passing game?
Nope. I think honestly, Boyd, we go through this every year where I just think his time has kind of, like, not that he's toast or he's done or anything, but I think his time as being like a target commanding player has kind of come and gone.
Mm-hmm.
And when you just have somebody, look, the Bengals are doing it right. They're having offensive issues. Rotate the entire world around Jamar Chase, right? Because he can be that type of player. You don't need to split it up to Tyler Boyd. Like, I just don't think he's that kind of guy anymore. I don't really know that he was ever that kind of guy. I think he's just a solid third receiver. So to me, I think this is Jamar Chase. When T. Higgins gets back, if he gets back here and he is considered day to day, he's the one I'm really interested in, Scott, because I think right now with the offensive line issues and Burrow certainly look better to me. We're all hanging a lot on that like little scramble he had. We're all putting a lot of stock into that play that he's like getting all the way back or close to it. I do think even if he's closer to full health and the line issues, I do think T. Higgins, like as the vertical possession non-yak receiver, is the guy that like I need a lot of questions answered there.
Yeah, and just a capper on the Bengals. Obviously, September was not a good month for them, and Burrow playing compromised. They've had the Higgins injury. If you can just get through, if you can just navigate the first couple of months with this team and they don't play next week, then they get San Francisco on the road, which is a tough draw. They get Buffalo, which is a tough draw. Just try to scrap any way you can to get in the playoffs, because the schedule has plenty of green lights when this team hits December. And what's going to happen invariably is some people will miss the playoffs with Jamar Chase or Joe Burrow, and then they'll say, "Hey, thanks a lot for the 4-touchdown game you had in December." But just do whatever you can to get in the playoffs. I still feel, like most people, I still feel very bullish about this offense. You're just going to have to weather the storm a little bit. Yeah.
Last thing, just on the Bengals for me, Joe Mixon. Is he going to be on like regression watch all year, like positive regression watch? Like, every time the expected fantasy points are higher than the player performance, because he's not going to get benched, right? There's no alternatives, but he was drafted to be a running back one. He has not been so far.
You hit the key point. No alternatives. He gets 25 carries last week. Travion Williams gets one. No other running back gets a rushing attempt for Cincinnati. That's how they do things, right? They have other running backs on the roster. They're not using them in front of Joe Mixon. This is not like a 70-30 or a 60-40, as so many teams are. This is like a 90-10 or a 95-5. So volume is always king in fantasy. Again, Mixon did so little with it. 29 touches. He doesn't even get to 100 total yards, but he's going to get all the work he can handle. And in a very ugly running back street right now, that makes him an automatic play.
All right, next game up here. You mentioned the San Francisco 49ers. That's our next game here. San Francisco 49ers minus 7.5 going to Cleveland to take on the Browns at the mere 37.5 point over under. And I get it. The Browns, with potentially PJ Walker starting if Deshaun Watson can't play, do not belong in the binge category. But Scott, the 49ers are like must-see TV right now. It felt sacrilegious putting them, I think they are a tier of one at the top in the NFL right now. It felt sacrilegious putting them anywhere else.
I'm curious to see how much the inefficiency of the Browns offense can trickle down to the Browns defense. The Browns defense is not only a top 5 unit in everybody's mind, I still think it might be the best defense in football, but you need to stay off the field sometimes. You need to let your offense run a drive and let the guys rest and control field position, stuff like that. And I'm afraid that the Browns offense, and here's the other big problem, is that if Watson can play, that's great because he's better than the other guys, but how much better is an open question. Right. I don't know what Deshaun Watson is right now. I had to move Cooper down in my rankings. A lot of the ancillary pieces of the Cleveland offense that we liked or were open to before the season, like Elijah Moore, like David Njoku, they're no-go right now. Obviously, the Niners defense on the other side is a problem too. So again, you see it with the Jets, right? Great defense. Is Zach Wilson going to torpedo it? We have to ask that question with the Browns, and no better who they play. You really can't feel great about their offense. Now, San Francisco life, we've just seen what happens. Once in a while, George Kittle has a huge game. You have to play him, knowing you can have 2 catches in any week, right? Deebo Samuel was without a target a couple weeks ago, but you're never far away from a Deebo Samuel blow-up game. Obviously, McCaffrey's easy to play, and we like Brandon Ayuk. You were early adopter to him, and you've often said that he was your target guy as much as you like Deebo. The kind of takeaway, the connective takeaway to all this is that Brock Purdy, man, he's graduated from, oh yeah, he's rosterable. Oh yeah, he's a streamer. He's a cheap DFS punt, whatever. No, he's just a guy you play because he's surrounded by too many good pieces. This is not very deep analysis, but he's working with McCaffrey. He's working with Ayuk. He's working with Debo. He's working with Kittle. He's working with Kyle Shanahan. Even the backup runners for the Niners look good in that blowout game against Dallas. What a no-show by the Cowboys, by the way. But Brock Purdy in the court, and we always think a quarterback as being an easy fill. There's been some quarterbacks who aren't playing that well. They're missing key guys. I'm at the point now where Brock Purdy, to me, circle of trust.
And I'm looking at expert consensus rankings on Fantasy Pros, and he's still QB 18, man.
That's not right. Not high enough. In a bye week of all things, no, you got to bump him. I got him at least 5 or 6 slots higher, I'm sure, and I might even go higher than that after I'm talking myself into it during this segment.
100%. Yeah, I got to look at where I've got him because I think rest of season, it's hard for me to imagine there are 12 quarterbacks I want more than Purdy right now.
People tell me with a straight face, you'd rather play Russell Wilson than Brock Purdy.
Right. We're recording this after before Thursday Night Football, so maybe Russell Wilson has thrown 5 touchdowns against the Chiefs. But here at the time when we're recording it, I think Scott and I are very skeptical of that.
No, absolutely. And again, you say Cleveland defense, you say road game, and that concerns you. But eventually, I was worried the Cleveland defense is its back's going to break because it has to carry the offense for 2.5 hours and it falls down. They turn the ball over a couple of short fields. And we say, oh, wow, the Browns defense hung in really well for a half. At the end of the day, the Niners still had 30 points.
Yeah, they're just too difficult to defend. I think the analysis fantasy-wise is so simple on San Francisco. We're to the point where we're beating you with the Brock Purdy point because that's all there is to say. Everybody else you just have to play. I am very curious on the Browns side if Deshaun Watson plays, and I don't frankly know if that's going to happen, right? It seems like it seems a little bit of a weird situation, right? It strikes me as a little odd that, Stefanski said he was medically cleared, but didn't play prior to the bye. Now he comes off the bye, and there's still kind of a question about it. And it is tough timing for Cleveland, that I think this was the perfect time during the bye to transition away fully from the offense that was into whatever it needs to be with Watson. And I'm curious how Elijah Moore and Jerome Ford and David Njoku, all these ancillary pieces that you mentioned, I'm curious how they fit into that. But I just think we could easily be leaving week 6 here with those questions still outstanding.
It's just so funny that Jerome Ford was like, oh my God, do you throw all your chips in for Jerome Ford after week 2? Since then, he's given you 10 carries for 18 yards. He's given you 9 carries for 26 yards. He does have 1 touchdown. He's caught a few passes, but anybody who spent all their fab on him right now is thinking, what the heck just happened? Now, the good news is, okay, you had to weather a bye. You have to weather the Niners game. That game could get out of hand. That game script could get out of hand. But then he gets Indianapolis, then he gets Seattle, then he gets Arizona. There's a Denver game not that far away, and we know the Broncos are just about as good of a get-well defense as you can ask for right now. So if you just could try to stay above water, keep swimming, keep paddling, keep breathing, and hopefully Jerome Ford. I don't like to call anybody a league winner. That category really encompasses so few players, but I still think Jerome Ford can be an impactful fantasy player. You just might have to wait a couple more weeks.
Yep, I think that's fair. I love it. It's just there's a Denver game in there. Hopefully that's the spot. Okay. Next one up here, AFC South rematch. We've actually already seen this game happen, but it's going to look a little bit different this time because the Indianapolis Colts will go to the Jacksonville Jaguars, who are 4.5-point home favorites with a 44.5 over/under. But the Colts will be quarterbacked by Gardner Minshew in a revenge game here. Scott, what do you think about this one?
There you go. The 4 best words in fantasy football: Gardner Minshew revenge game. And look. He is one of the most enviable pieces in the NFL because every team wishes they had a Gardner Minshew to play when Aaron Rodgers gets hurt, when Deshaun Watson gets hurt. He's one of the best backups in the league, and he's helped the Colts offense all of a sudden really interesting, right? I mean, Taylor comes back. Zach Moss was so good that they eased Taylor in. He hardly played. You've always been a Michael Pittman guy. I am too. Maybe not quite to your level, but we're both pro Pittman. 2 thumbs up on that. Josh Downs has turned into an interesting player. We like Shane Steichen. And the Colts are drawing the Jaguars at the perfect time. 2 London games. And the last game the Jacksonville Jaguars played was a very impressive upset win of the Bills. They've been eating the fish and chips for a couple of weeks. Now they come back to America. I think Indianapolis plus the points is a great play this week. I think Frank Schwab would probably co-sign on that.
I'm with it.
I could easily see them coming out flat, the Jaguars. And at halftime, it's like, well, wow. Gardner Minshew and the Colts are up 17-3, and then Jacksonville will wake up, and then it'll become a game, and maybe Jacksonville wins it anyway. But this is the Colts are drawing the Jaguars at the right time. And I think 21-point team total for the Colts. I think they'll at least meet that or go over it. Bottom line is this. If you were looking to play Michael Pittman or Downs or the backs, don't be skewed by, oh, well, they're not playing Josh. They can't play Richardson this week. They have to play Gardner Minshew. They're obviously different skill sets, obviously different trajectories in their career. I still think the Colts offense is going to get into the 20s without any problem. And there's plenty of Colts I'm willing to start proactively.
And we haven't seen the Jaguars put together a complete game yet anyways, right? So it's a perfect spot for Colts plus 4.5 here. I love Josh Downs, man. I've been looking into him. He just looks like the exact same player he was at UNC. He just like transported into the NFL. Guy's always open. Michael Pittman is always open. Gardner Minshew's got a pretty easy life here with a good running game behind him too. So I like that call. And obviously, look, this is the team that we saw that led to a lot of maybe overreactions about Calvin Ridley and Trevor Lawrence in week 1. But still, the point remains that wide receivers against this defense are like must play options in fantasy. That obviously goes to Calvin Ridley, but I think it goes to Christian Kirk too. Has just been like rock solid so far this year. Jacksonville's kind of turning into, Scott, a pretty nice and tidy fantasy team where Lawrence is probably a QB1, even if he hasn't hit the full potential yet. He's probably, he'll get there at some point. Ridley is a must start. I think Kirk is kind of a must start, and Travis Etienne is like a top 5 running back at this point.
Well said. Narrow usage, concentration. Maybe Etienne right now is the only guy who's threatening to be a home run. Maybe the other players become floor players, but whatever. They're easy to start every week, and it's just nice. It's reassuring when you get to your roster. Let's get to the hard picks, right? Because I know I'm starting Calvin Ridley. I know I'm starting Travis Etienne. I know I'm starting Trevor Lawrence, although it's conceivable some rosters could have a quarterback where he's maybe a week-by-week guy, but we want as many automatic green check marks. We want as many easy buttons as we can get. And the Jaguars, we also have to mention Evan Ingram, who's still a plus tight end to me. But
you probably don't have a better tight end than Evan Ingram.
You probably don't. But they're not
a weird team.
They're not messing around with fifth receivers and third running backs and fullbacks. And Lawrence only runs kind of when he needs to. He doesn't run a lot to take a lot off the table. So the Jaguars are pretty easy on the fantasy stomach.
Rest of season, would you rather have Brock Purdy or Trevor Lawrence?
It's a great question. Ceiling has to be Lawrence. The floor, I would lean. It's not a definitive dunk. Though I think the floor is a little bit more towards Purdy. But it comes down to, I'll give you the cop-out answer. What do you want from this position, right? I mean, if you thought you needed to go to the moon at quarterback, or maybe you're trying to tie in Ridley in a league where a connection, a hookup at quarterback, stacking a quarterback and receiver would make sense, and I could see the Lawrence play. But you ask me who has the better floor. Right now, I have to say it's Brock Purdy.
Right now, in points per game, Brock Purdy QB8 and Trevor Lawrence all the way down at QB20. So it's an interesting thought, and we probably didn't think we'd be here, in week 6. All right, next game up here, Detroit Lions -3 heading to Tampa Bay to face the Buccaneers. The fight in Baker Mayfield's coming off a bye, 42.5 point over under. I think this game could be a little more fantasy friendly than the 42.5 implies, Scott. I really like the way both of these offenses are playing right now. What do we think about this one?
Well, the NFL likes it. They have flexed the cuddly America's team Detroit Lions to 4:25 p.m. Their second window game, which tells you how you feel about them. I'm really curious to see what we get from the Lions the next 2 weeks. 2 road games. Jared Goff has better home splits than road splits. A lot of quarterbacks do, but it makes sense. Indoors, you're never going to have bad weather indoors. The track is faster and all that stuff. But in Tampa Bay, just when I thought I trusted Baker Mayfield, they play the Eagles. They get their lunch eaten, their lunch money stolen. So they need to kind of prove something to me here. This total looks low to me. I think this is going to be a game played in the mid-40s, maybe even a little bit higher. And I'm glad that we'll get to have more eyeballs on it because obviously there's fewer games in that late window. Wasn't it interesting last week that the Lions didn't have their best players, right? I mean, Sun God didn't go, and you can debate what Gibbs is right now in their offense, but he's certainly somebody we drafted aggressively, and it was Montgomery rambling around. Sam Laporta has been this rookie tight end, breaking all the rules and everything, and Goff's been fantasy playable. Josh Reynolds outplayed Jameson Williams again. We're at the point where we need prove-it weeks from Jameson Williams. I can't start him on spec. I know a lot of people are in really dire straits at receiver. I'm still going to say no to almost any Jameson Williams pick. Bottom line, I'd like this game for the Lions. Obviously, if they're at home, I'd like it more for them in the spot. That's why they're only 3-point favorites. And it looks like almost a survivor setup because maybe this is a flat game for Detroit, but you're going to play. You know who to play. You know what punches to make on that team. This to me is going to give us a good sense of who Baker Mayfield is. If Baker Mayfield can get out of this with 280 and a couple of touchdowns, if he can give some buoyancy to Godwin, who I know you're in on this week, give Mike Evans, give him some fantasy love this week. Okay, fine. I can play these guys most of the time. Detroit's defense is interesting, and they're a good pass rush. They look good in the right day, but you can also put up points against them, and Seattle had no problem doing that a couple of weeks ago. So I think this game's going to tell us. I think we'll have a pretty good read on the Buccaneers after this game. I think this is kind of a litmus test for them off the bye.
Yeah, I'm with you. You mentioned Chris Godwin. I think he's in line for a pretty nice day in this one. He had probably definitely his best game of the season, 11 targets, 8 catches, over 100 yards before the bye. Obviously, Mike Evans left that game with a hamstring injury. Mike Evans right now is not practicing. Coming off of a bye week, he's a 30-year-old receiver with a hamstring injury. It's worth asking whether they don't play him in this one, right? He has a history with the hamstring injuries as well. So, no Mike Evans, Chris Godwin. Detroit is slowly turning into a pass funnel defense. I think that over the course of the season, their defense is going to outkick expectations. But right now, they're top 5 or at least top 10 in rushing success rate allowed, and they're 16th in going down in dropback success rate allowed because Emmanuel Mosley now has torn his ACL. The CJ Gardner-Johnson, like a lot of these defensive free agents they brought to the table here to improve the secondary are starting to leave town. And by the way, like, the Bucs don't run the ball well anyways. They're dead last in yards per carry. So I think this is a really nice setup for Chris Godwin here.
What's our level of trust on Rachaad White?
Like 0.
Like 0.
He's weird. It's weird because I say that, but like you probably have to play him just because he sees so much volume. But I just can't imagine that they're gonna like continue to roll with Rachaad White, and if they continue to get that level of production. It's not all on Rachaad White. They don't have the best run blocking offensive line. They've outkicked expectations from a pass blocking standpoint. Baker's had a pretty decent amount of time there. So it's not all on Rachaad White, but fact of the matter is they're one of the worst rushing teams in the NFL. He hasn't necessarily been an efficient player in his own right. So I wonder if just, like Sean Tucker or someone like that can eventually gets in here.
I was wondering how high up Sean Tucker was on your contingency upside, stashes, if he was a priority guy, or okay, if you have nothing better, I can sign off on it, or just no, steer away from this offense altogether.
I think about it. You probably have to have a pretty deep bench, especially during buys to add somebody like Sean Tucker generally. But I think if we get past the buys, or you particular listener, you get past your bad buy time and like you need to start stashing those running backs, I'd at least think about Sean Tucker, because there are guys out there that you need to add because they have clear injury value. I think Sean Tucker has injury and just like eventually let's get this guy the ball value. All right, let's move on. Final game here in the binge category. Dallas Cowboys, 2.5-point favorites going to Los Angeles to take on the Chargers, coming off their bye. 50.5-point over-under. We're going to get Austin Eckler back in this game. That's exciting. I'm interested to see how that changes the offense. But Scott, I'm curious your temperature on the Cowboys, pretty much like the discussion point of the week. Where is this offense at for you at this point?
I think you can say that for both offenses, really. But we'll start with Dallas. Is it nice, producer Colin, to get another home game? You go to Los Angeles. What was it going to be? 80-20 Cowboy fans, 90-10, 100-0? It's going to be, every time Dallas gets a first down, the crowd is going to explode. Chargers are used to that. It's just the way life is right now. But I'm waiting. I'm waiting for Dak Prescott to show okay, you have to play Pollard, and you don't feel that bad about it. He's been fine. CeeDee Lamb's been, I'd say, just a mild disappointment. You have to play Lamb. And the Chargers' pass defense has been so awful that it's hard to imagine CeeDee Lamb won't have a huge game. I'm waiting for the secondary piece. I've been pounding the table every week for Ferguson. I feel like 1 week that hit. Most weeks it hasn't. He's got all these red zone targets, all these goal line targets. He's only got 1 touchdown. I've ranked him higher than industry average this week. I'm waiting for that to happen. Brandon Cooks getting kind of like those 3 to 6 targets every week, and he bumped that up just a little bit more this week. I have him on my sleeper sheet. Again, the Chargers could not be a better matchup. So Dallas, who are you, right? You lost to Arizona. Well, every team has a couple of games where they just don't show up. They maybe play a little bit entitled. Arizona's a plucky team. Fine. We can live past that. We look past that. And then they play New England, who's garbage, and they kicked the snot out of New England. They were so uncompetitive last week against San Francisco. You lose to the Niners is okay. But you were set up to have 2 hours of garbage time, and that was not fruitful at all. To the point I couldn't even watch it anymore. I'm like, okay, there's a baseball game on. I'm out of here. This is just painful to watch. I don't enjoy this. So who are you, Dallas Cowboys? This is the game you should feast against this defense. Now on the Chargers side, obviously like life without Mike Williams, they get Eckler back, which they badly need. Justin Herbert is still somebody we will play proactively. Is Keenan Allen going to be the 10 targets off the bus guy I was hoping for once Williams got hurt? Or are there going to be too many games where he might be in the 5 to 8 category? I just feel like this construction of this wide receiver room means that Allen should like be in contention for the lead in targets the rest of the season, but that hasn't played like that lately.
I look, and you and I, full disclosure, we're Keenan Allen faders coming into this year. We, and I've already, publicly lashed myself for that. But
Kick him the L.
I am concerned that if Keenan Allen remains in the role that we've seen so far, where they have schemed up a lot of looks for him to get zone coverage and, working like we talked about it with Austin, where against the Vikings in particular to beat their blitz, they have basically 2 receivers run out to block and he runs a slant route. And it by all intents and purposes, it becomes almost like a deep screen pass. If they're doing that with Keenan and then Austin's back getting, 7 to 8 targets a week, we're going to be complaining about Justin Herbert's ADOT all over again, right? It's almost like a lose-lose proposition here where like either Eckler loses targets, which I don't think is the worst thing in the world, because if he runs as efficiently as he did and is the ground game in general as efficient as it was in week 1, it's not really the biggest deal in the world, although that is tough to replicate. Either he loses out there, Allen loses target share, or we all lose because we have to see senseless like ADOT charts with Justin Herbert running across our Twitter timelines or whatever. So I'm wondering if all 3 of these things can exist together. And if not, then you know what? They need Quentin Johnson, who we mentioned earlier, to be a post-bye rookie bump candidate, because he has to get better. What he put out against the Raiders before the bye, like on film, is just not good enough. Like he has to be better than that. And they weren't counting on him to start into this season. They expected him to be a developmental player. He was clearly a developmental prospect, but now like they need him to not be.
This is the fork in the road, pick a lane game for Quentin Johnson. As you said, did very little in the week 4. They have the bye week. So if they're going to get him up to speed and they're expecting him to be a major factor this season, we're going to see something this week. If he has a quiet game, has a quiet snap share, quiet route participation, then you have my permission to drop him after this game. Now, you're probably not going to play him, but he has more pedigree than Josh Palmer. The whole idea was that Palmer would run ahead of Johnson to start, but at some point Johnson, you would think, would close the ground or maybe even pass him entirely. If that's going to happen, we need to see a major step forward in week 6.
Yep, absolutely. I'm almost wondering now, even if there's no catastrophic injury, if I need to tape like a solo Monday Night Football reaction to publish on the Tuesday podcast, because there's going to be so much like outrageous analysis, maybe overreaction, so many takes on either team, whichever one loses. It probably does depend on producer Colin's mood after another Cowboys Iron game, but we shall see what happens. A lot of questions with both of those teams. That brings us to the end of the binge category. Let us begin the games you need to stream here in week 6, starting with Baltimore Ravens, -4, Tennessee Titans, 41.5 over under. Scott, I think this is another like 2 offenses that we have some questions about here. What do you think about this one?
I'm nervous. Low total. We know the Titans suffocate everybody's running game. They're going to dare Baltimore to beat them by throwing the ball. Zay Flowers has been obviously Mark Andrews, but Zay Flowers has really only been the only receiver we can trust in the Baltimore receiver room. I think there's been good Lamar Jackson weeks, bad Lamar Jackson weeks. You're going to play him anyway. And on the Tennessee side, man, Derrick Henry managers don't want to talk about this, but Tajay Spears is not going away. He's getting snaps. Yeah. He's getting touches. He's the guy they prefer in the passing game. Now, the Ravens are 4-point favorites, so the script would set up that maybe Tennessee would have to throw more than they expect.
Looks good too in it as well, Scott. We should mention, like, this isn't one of those situations where you can be complaining at the Titans for doing this, because I think it might be good for Derrick Henry long term, and Spears is making the most of those touches.
Right, it's a meritocracy. Spears has forced his way into this rotation. I'm thinking he's getting another 3 to 5 catches here, and even though we saw a little bit more from Chico Okonkwo last week. I've just taken the loss on him. I've taken the loss on all the non-Tennessee pass guys other than DeAndre Hopkins, he's on all those Deontay Johnson leaderboards of, the most this without a touchdown, the most that without a touchdown. That touchdown is eventually coming. And at least his volume has him safely floored at wide receiver 3. Hopkins could easily percolate a slot higher. I'm just worried that this could be an ugly game, because I think every Tennessee game is one of those, I don't know, does it rain more for Tennessee games, or the game that ends a half hour before all the other games, or a game that's like, oh yeah, and there's still no touchdowns in the Tennessee game. Mike Vrabel
doesn't help that this is the Tottenham Hotspur game of the week, where all the Bills players were complaining about the cement turf or whatever, so that could make it even uglier.
Yeah, I'm just worried we're going to be like, oh wow, still not a touchdown in that Baltimore Tennessee game, or why is this game? They're using a running clock today. I don't know. I'm just afraid it's going to be another 7. Like we talk about the Steelers and the Ravens never play a normal game. I feel like every Tennessee game is kind of backwards. So I am very carefully tiptoeing around. There's, again, some players you have to play. You're playing Andrews, you're playing Flowers, you're playing Jackson, you're playing Derrick Henry. But the 41.5 total is low as it is, and I think this game's going to come under that number.
Yeah, just not getting enough out of other guys other than Hopkins and Spears and Henry. Traylon Burks, we'll see if he practices. Mike Vrabel said they hope he can be running around this week. Even when he's been on the field, he hasn't really been an impact player. Chig, they're not getting enough out of. Let me make the case, though, for Baltimore that, like, I know we're in a lot of angst about what happened last week. Lamar Jackson plays really well. They have an absurd amount of drops, and then he throws the game away at the end. And I get that, like, he shouldn't have been put in that position. They should have been blowing the Steelers out like 35-10 if we could have just caught some footballs here. Rashad Bateman, Nelson Aguilar, Mark Andrews, the whole thing. I get that, but you still can't throw the game away at the end. You still got to close that thing out, even if it shouldn't have been in that position. That being said, Scott, they could have blown the Steelers out like 35-10. And the Titans are weak in the secondary. I mean, just letting guys run free. This should be a spot where this passing game bounces back. I'm with you, though, that the Ravens have just generally been like, there's just a tick missing here. Odell doesn't look good. Bateman can only really run short routes at this point. And I think the lack of consistent practice time has shown up, obviously catching the football and tracking the football down the field against the Steelers. Zay Flowers is only really been used either super deep or super short. There's a whole chunk of intermediate there, but I think the fact that there's meat left on the bone for Baltimore that they should have bit off last week, and this is a good matchup, does at least lend me to be optimistic about Baltimore's side here.
And I wonder if maybe I should have been more realistic about how quickly the Todd Monken offense would start to look smooth. It hasn't yet, but between the injuries and the fact that everything is new for everybody, maybe I should have accepted that there could be a slow liftoff.
All right, next game up here. Washington Commanders plus 2.5 in Atlanta to take on the Falcons, 42.5 over under. Scott, I can totally see this game being like dragged down to the muck, in the mire. The Falcons love to do that to you. At the same time, though, they're, with the Falcons being kind of a pass funnel defense and the Commanders leading the NFL in pass rate over expectation, even if, as we talked about with Dalton yesterday, it's kind of an inflated statistic. I don't love what the Commanders are doing on offense. The Falcons are always kind of hit and miss, but they're coming off a great Desmond Ridder game. Talk me out of thinking that there is a lot of attractive fantasy potential juice in this game.
Here's what it comes down to me. This is the most interesting aspect of this game. Sam Howell hands out sacks like Halloween candy, and sacks are more, we always say this, they're more of a quarterback stat than they are an offensive line stat. The Commanders are allowing all these sacks mostly because Howell's inexperienced, and sometimes he has a little bit more faith in his athletic ability to make a broken play than maybe he should. Okay. The Falcons have 5 sacks, and all the metrics that measure pass rate, they lag in the lower part of the league. They have, so we have a team that can't stop giving away sacks and a team that doesn't want sacks. What's going to happen, man? So, and we also know
what makes me nervous there is that the Bears were that team coming into last week, and what they get 4, I think, in the game against Howell.
But if you totally would have taken a Bears defensive stream last week, and of course the enemy man at one point he just said, "Okay, we ain't running anymore. That's it. We're just going to throw." I mean, it felt like Howell threw 80 passes in that game. And yet, who gets home? Curtis Samuel. We're Curtis Samuel guys. We like Ohio State receivers. He's been the one receiver who's played over expectation in that room. Glory and disappointment. He had one good game. John Dotson's probably a cut right now, which breaks my heart.
Yeah,
But
sad.
we gotta play to where the game is. That's just an act. And I don't know what Brian Robinson is. I want to think, if nothing else, he's a boring floor guy. But now I'm afraid that there might be game scripts where he's out of it completely. And we know the Falcons. What do they want to do? Ritter, better game last week, more proactive passing. But they're also one of those teams that you're never surprised when they throw like the fewest passes in a week, or they're really under the league average. And I'm hoping. I've been burned before by squinting to try to see optimism with the Falcons. Oh, okay. I'm squinting to see Kyle Pitts' optimism, and he was part of the week 5 tight end breakout. Right? There's so many guys who had done nothing for 4 weeks, had a really good game in week 5, and Kyle Pitts was one of those guys. I want to say there's a ray of hope for Pitts, for London, even for Ritter. I want to think that they're going to, Bijan Robinson's weird because we know he's great. And every week there's just this Bijan Robinson explosion of videos. It's just this happiness we do. Look at this play they called for Bijan. Look at this run Bijan had. Look at how he moved his hips and like faked 3 guys out of their cleats. That's awesome. I still feel like the usage isn't quite. They're not, for a team that wants to run it a lot. I still feel like they're not giving Bijan Robinson as many touches as they could. I feel like he could be having a dominant fantasy season. I think to this point it's merely been a good season. I'd still take him early in the first round, maybe as early as 3 or 4 in a redraft. I'm in on Robinson. I just feel like they're giving us, they're giving us a cocktail. They're not filling it to the top. I'd like to have the full drink, please.
That's a great way of putting it. And right now Bijan is running back 8 on the season, 14.3 points per game. Like you said, I feel like there is an easy path where he could be north of 20. He could be at least up to like 18, 19. It's just there's either some weeks the targets evaporate, or like some weeks they want to get Tyler Algier involved, which I think is fair to wonder if either of those things change, because they're not going to hit their ceiling offensively if they're just throwing the ball to Bijan. As great as he is, they've got to get London and Pitts involved, especially Drake London, as they did last week, and they got Kyle Pitts involved last week as well. And then Tyler Algier is like too good to completely be erased, right? So he is doing more of the Elijah Mitchell thing that people feared was going to happen to Christian McCaffrey. Like Tyler Algier has actually been that guy to Bijan Robinson. And again, I think he's too good to kind of completely go away. I do think it's a good spot for Drake London. This Commanders secondary has been a joke. They're kind of like debating whether they're going to keep playing rookie cornerback Emmanuel Forbes, who's just been taken to the woodshed the last 2 weeks by A.J. Brown and DJ Moore. I think it's a good spot for London. I'm, willing to keep rolling Kyle Pitts out there and accept that some weeks it's going to be 3 for 24. And on the Commanders side, yeah, it is unfortunate with the receivers at this point. I'm hoping, Scott, that and I gave Eric Bieniemy a ton of grief on the show yesterday for some of the protection, because your quarterback's not taking 90 on pace to take 99 sacks without being some of it being his fault and some of it being your fault,
for sure,
and some of it being the offensive line's fault. Like there's a way to split this up 3 ways here. I'm hoping that the receiver rotation at least is going to stop at some point, just because it has to. And hopefully it's because Dotson has been dealing with an ankle and McLaurin had the toe thing. But for now, like Logan Thomas and Curtis Samuel are guys you can consider playing.
Yeah, they're both Mr. October guys. You're going to like them during bye week season. And at some point, you're going to need more upside when more of your roster is in play. It's healthier, or we have full slates back. And you're right. Success has many parents. So does failures. As much as I want to put Howell at the top of the blame for the sacks, certainly some of that is on Bieniemy, and a lot of that is on the offensive line as well.
Next game up here, Minnesota Vikings -3 going into Chicago to take on the Bears. A little fishy, Minnesota -3, going in to take on a hot Bears team without one of the best players in the sport in Justin Jefferson, 43.5 over under. We talked a lot about the passing game for both of these teams yesterday with Dalton, and I'm curious your thoughts as well. But to start here, because I know it will be a big fantasy question, Chicago Bears are obviously missing Khalil Herbert. He's going to be out for a little bit now. Roschon Johnson, what's kind of your temperature check on this running back situation?
It needs to get out of concussion protocol, but I would feel good about starting Johnson if he's cleared to go. And it's an early game, so at least we'll have clarity before the majority of the slate goes off. Minnesota, we know, is a heavy pass team, both in neutral game script and when they're chasing the game. So as they have the bizarro season last year, they go 13-4. They're outscored. This year, it seems like they're going to lose all their close games. It just, it's funny how those things correct themselves year over year. I don't know how much buoyancy is in the offense without Jefferson. It's easy to say, oh, well, Osborne, great, and Addison, great. They're going to get a lot more volume. That's awesome. But you're not going to get into the red zone as often when you don't have somebody like Justin Jefferson, who makes everybody in the offense is better efficiency-wise when Jefferson plays. There's more opportunity to go around. I get it. But if you're like a Madison manager, you don't want Jefferson off the field. You want the offense to score 30 points. And now their chances of doing that goes down. I'm not telling you anything you don't know. Who thought DJ Moore, man, league winner? He's just blowing up. And Justin Fields is doing what we want. We want teams. Mike Daniel does it. Falcons don't always do it. Who are my best players? Who's my best receiver? Well, that would be DJ Moore. Let's throw the ball a lot to DJ Moore. That would be a good idea. Minnesota's pass defense so bad, man. DJ Moore is on a couple of my teams. It's at the point now, if you're like us, you play in a lot of fantasy leagues. At this point, I try in every league, and you can fix teams to get off the bad starts. I get it. But you start playing favorites, right? You're like, oh, where am I really loaded?
Yeah.
And I have one team with Stephon Diggs and DJ Moore, and I just love that team. That team is such a joy. Team. So it's like the teacher says, like teacher comments, pleasure to have in class. That team is a pleasure to have in class.
I love it. Alexander Madison, theoretically good matchup for him here, but he's still on Cam Akers. When is he going to lose some work to Cam Akers watch, right? And yeah, you mentioned Roschon Johnson's got to get out of the concussion protocol. I would at least make a speculative ad for Donta Foreman, who is only 26% rostered in Yahoo leagues, and will be at very least will be active for this game. Matt Eberflus confirmed that this week.
Is Cole Kmet just set and forget at this point?
Dude, pretty much. That's another guy that I've got on the I've got in the Eckler's Edge league, which I need to win this week because I need Austin to beat himself in that league, and I got Cole Kmet. And I feel great about it. I feel great about having Cole Kmet. That's where I am at this point in my life, Scott.
Who is winning the Eckler's Edge League right now?
I think it's Chris Harris.
Okay, yeah. Friend of the show. Good guy.
Friend of the show, yes. I believe Chris Harris, now that I said it, I want to actually get this right. Yeah, Chris Harris is friggin' 5-0 in that league.
5-0. Yeah. Dunking on the Eckler's Edge League. Okay. How is Austin doing?
Took his first loss last week. He's 4-1.
Yeah,
I'm 3-2. So Austin's third. I'm in fourth. And Nick Ercolano is in second with 4.
I'm not surprised. I mean, Austin, obviously, we love him because he not only does he embrace fantasy, but he understands the nuances of it. So I'm not surprised he's a good team. A little disappointed.
He drafted Brandon Ayuk. He knows ball.
There you go. A little disappointed in Team Harmon, man. You better at least make the playoffs in that league, or I'm very disappointed.
My first round pick has been hurt all year, and I got to look at him on the damn show, So I'm trying to tell him to get his ass back on the field. I'm kidding.
It's so meta, man. Austin Eckler's Edge League, and you have Austin Eckler. That's so great, man. I love that.
It's beautiful. All right. I have Roschon Johnson in that league, so I'm going to need him to clear this concussion protocol. All right, let's move on to the next game here, for God's sakes. Okay, New Orleans Saints, -1.5, going into Houston to take on the Texans, 42.5 point over-under. Hey, this is an interesting game here. I kind of couldn't decide whether put it in stream or skip, but I feel pretty good with stream just because CJ Stroud has been must-see TV.
CJ Stroud must-see TV, and Dalton Schultz must start tight end with the cluster injuries the Texans have at the receiver room. And Schultz has been good, but touchdowns the last 2 weeks. He had 10 targets, 7 catches last week. And Stroud, maybe I'd like to see him pull the string a little bit more. We talked on one of the earlier shows about the ideal interception rate is not 0. I know he has that great streak of no interceptions, and we like that. And we're all talking about maybe he should have been the first round pick, and Carolina's having nightmares about this. But sometimes you got to throw maybe a little bit more 50-50 balls. That will not be Schultz's game. He's obviously running tight end underneath routes, but feel good about Schultz, even against the New Orleans defense that we like. I'm still not there yet with Derek Carr. I know the Saints had a blow-up game last week, but it was the Patriots. They're horrible. And that should be like all of our Patriots analysis. The Patriots, yeah, they're horrible. Move on. But Derek Carr, to me, last year.
Can't guess what category the Patriots are in this week.
You need a new category for that. You're like the unmentionables, you don't even skip them. You don't
unsubscribe.
When you go onto your grid where it has your choices, the stuff you've saved up, the stuff you've queued up, they shouldn't even show up. They're like an illegal chess move. You shouldn't even see them. But I want to see more from Derek Carr. I feel like he's been a net negative for Chris Olave, who we obviously love. And we saw that first game back for Kamara 2 weeks ago. He gets all these checkdowns because that's what Derek Carr felt comfortable doing. I'm not sure the Saints are good, man. But that division, the schedules, the Falcons probably have the easiest remaining schedule in the NFL. The Saints are not far behind that. But Derek Carr, man, he's the guy. He's the connective tissue to everybody. He needs to step it up, and it's a good spot for them to do it as a mild favorite against the Texans.
I'm not all the way there with Carr either, but I do think I want to see him get back to something close to full health before like totally condemning the whole thing. But I would love to see more from Chris Olave. I would love to see, like I think Alvin Kamara's usage has been great. Those are the two guys on that offense. And then, the Texans, man, like you play Nico Collins every week, even if he is going to be a little volatile because he's not like an elite receiver or anything. He's going to be volatile. You get that. But I am a little worried. Like at least it's at home. But CJ Stroud going against like Dennis Allen's defense with the way they're playing in the secondary right now. I'm willing to bet that his interception streak comes to an end this week. I'll say that.
You're right. Yeah, that's a good prop to get on. Stroud's going to throw a pick this week. I'll sign off.
All right, next game up here, Arizona Cardinals at Los Angeles Rams, who are 7-point home favorites, 48.5 over under. These two teams are definitely playing above expectations, Scott.
They are. Although I was starting to wonder if the Cardinals are so underrated that they're overrated, right? My expectations were so non-existent before the season. Like, oh, they gave Washington a game. Oh, they gave the Giants a game. Oh, look, they beat Dallas. Now I'm like, okay, maybe they're pretty good. Or, plucky and competitive in that, Dan Campbell way, with an oddball coach who has some weird sound bites.
They're just one of those. You're right, Scott. The Cardinals are fine, but let's not get carried away with it here.
Well, look, at least Dobbs offers buoyancy of the offense. We're playing Hollywood Brown confidently. We're playing Zach Ertz, kind of holding our nose, catch and fall. He did drop one touchdown a couple of weeks ago, but whatever. Ertz is playable. He got home last week. You could play Michael Wilson. I know he's like one of the slower receivers in the league. He didn't do it last week, but he might be somebody you can play. At least there's more to be mined from Arizona than anybody expected before the season. And with the Rams, hey, we got what we wanted last week. Cooper Kupp looked great. Puka Nacua, still plenty involved and gave a line that anybody could live with. And Kieran Williams, I know the production wasn't there, but as Salvici was pointing out, I mean, the usage was through the roof. I mean, the guy never comes off the field, and he always catches a few passes. So he's game script proof. These are two teams. I was worried that the Cardinals would be the worst team in the league. I was worried that the Rams, without Kupp, who knows when Kupp's coming back. I was worried about Stafford. I was worried about the line. I thought the Rams had look out below potential, and here we are. The Cardinals are more fantasy plucky than I expected, and the Rams are actually a plus offense for fantasy. They're also a team, with full respect to Arizona, I will be looking to play the Rams in Survivor, the big obvious favorites I don't have available this week. I'm happy to say I always think it's harder to be good in the NFL than it is to have problems or to stink. These are two teams that have been better than I expected, and man, we need those teams. We need teams in fantasy that outkick their expectations. Both of these teams have done that.
Rams are just a great example of what good coaching and good quarterback play can give you. They haven't been perfect. They've been weirdly like a great first half and not a great second half team so far this year. I think some of that is defenses are able a little more to tee off on Matt Stafford in the second half, but for fantasy, they're so nice and tidy. Like the distribution, over 60% of the targets to Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua. Kieran Williams, as you mentioned, getting all the touches. Arizona, I think we're at a point where I agree with you. You can play Zach Ertz in a pinch. Michael Wilson is kind of on the bye week radar. Marquise Brown's like, I wish I had the stones to be more effusive with my love for Marquise Brown this preseason, but I was scared with the Cardinals too. The running back situation, Scott, Amari DiMercado went for, some decent fantasy waiver wire bids. Keontae Ingram comes out on the depth chart. Everybody's got a hot take about this. I don't have any. Do you have a hot take about this backfield?
He's getting a double-digit touches, and that's a currency. I just don't think it's going to be past maybe 12 to 14 touches in a game they're probably going to lose. He's a low-end RB2, high-end RB3 for me. I think I have him in the late 20s.
Same. DiMercado should be involved in the passing game, and I think that's the key here. That's the key for me. All right, Philadelphia Eagles, -7, going to New York to face the Jets with the 41 over-under. Interesting one here, Scott. Obviously, the Jets are the Jets. And then the Eagles, though, I mean, I think that's the one question with the Eagles. Is this the week where Devonta Smith gets going? Nick Sirianni literally actually publicly commented on like their squeaky wheel philosophy at some point this week, and it's been sort of, all right, well, A.J. Brown has a down game. Let's have A.J. Brown go off for 3 weeks. Same with Dallas Goedert last week. Is it Devonta Smith's turn in this one?
Yeah, the Eagles, they're playing with their food team, to steal your term.
Seriously, though.
They have a little bit of that Niners vibe where it's like the Niners are like a game of musical chairs where it's like, okay, which great Niner doesn't do anything today? Oh, sorry, it's Deebo Samuel's turn. Sorry, it's George Kittle's turn. The Eagles are like that. It's like, sorry, Devonta Smith not invited to the game today. Sorry, Dallas Goedert, tight end. They have more variance, so it's not as surprising there. A.J. Brown every once in a while has a quiet game, gets a little hot in the sidelines, and the next week, A.J. Brown looks completely unstoppable. We know their backfield could be difficult to negotiate. There's only one ball to go around, and unfortunately for fantasy, Hurts is so good around the goal line that you're never throwing a fade pass to A.J. Brown because Jalen Hurts could just run it in from the 1 or 2 anytime they want. I still think that play, I feel like everybody's going to have a side on that. Are you for it or against it? I'm actually against it. I want the NFL to get rid of all the turf fields, and I want them to get rid of that play. It's a rugby play. I don't think it's the spirit of what football should be. I also think there's probably some injury risk there, although I'm spitballing on that. I'm not qualified maybe to speak to that. I haven't studied it at any deep level, but the league would be better off without it. I know the Eagles like, hey, we're great at it. These other teams could run it if they could. They're not as good at it as we are. Fine. You're going to be good at anything you do. You have great offensive infrastructure, great play calling, obviously great talent. I'll say this for the Jets. At least they're doing 2 things we want, man. They're identifying their guys. Breece Hall, they steered into him, yet it's Denver, so a little bit of an asterisk, but Breece Hall looks fantastic. Yeah. He's looked good really all year. It's just a matter of how much work is he going to get. Gets a huge test against the Eagles front. Just unfair that Jalen Carter get to be added to this Eagles roster. I mean, that's what the Eagles do, man. Yeah, he's basically give him, if he's healthy, he's going to win Defensive Player of the Year, Rookie Defensive Player of the Year in a walk. But Hall will get his touches. And I know Garrett Wilson, it's like you're just hoping he huffs and puffs and justifies that you played him. But at least the targets are there. And at least Zach Wilson, and again, sometimes you squint to see upside or optimism, and then you regret it. And you're like, why was I doing that? I think Zach Wilson's playing a little bit better. And at least when he drops back, I expect him to be looking for Garrett Wilson first.
Yes.
You have to take small victories in this offense. That's a small victory.
They have drilled into his head, hang in there and wait for Garrett. Okay. Yep. Like they have, and which is right. That's at this point, all they can hope to do with Zach. I think it's a big test for Breece Hall, although I'm with you. He's back. It's just going to be a much more different situation going against the Eagles front than the Broncos front. And yeah, Eagles, man, like it seems like one of their guys is going to cycle into the panic meter every single week because it's like, how could this guy not go off? But just play them all. Play Swift, who had 6 catches last week. It's obviously gone over 100 yards twice. You play A.J. Brown every week. You play Devonta Smith every week. You play Dallas Goedert. And if one of your league mates is dumb enough to think like it's over for Devonta Smith, trade for him. Like it's going to be fine.
This is trade for Devonta Smith week. Even all you really need to make that trade work out is have your opponent be a little bit down on him. I don't know that anybody's dim enough, unsophisticated enough to be like, I got to cut the Smith guy. He's terrible. I don't think people are to that point. But there are people who are frustrated. When good players don't produce, everybody gets nervous, especially when part of the narrative of not producing is that there are other guys. A.J. Brown's better than Devonta Smith. Nobody's going to dispute that. Doesn't mean Devonta Smith isn't really good. I would love to go. If you can get him, and I know this may not be applicable to a lot of people, and don't go to the Devonta Smith manager and say, hey, I need Devonta Smith. I'll take him off your hands. That doesn't work. You go and say, hey, I like the depth in your receiver room, especially if he's found somebody that was unexpected who's producing now. Maybe he's looking for a reason to bench Devonta Smith. Go in a little bit coy when you start those negotiations.
Love that. Scott is literally the best with the psychological approach of trading. And I need you in my Discord sometimes, Scott, because I get people who are just like, need to trade for a run, and I get it. Everybody wants to make fantasy trades, but like there's an approach to this thing. There's a dance here, and like it's always like, I need to trade for this running back. It's like, well, you have a glut of receivers. What if the other team has a glut of receivers too? You've got to have a little bit of a dance partner here. You just can't trade for anybody.
For sure. And again, I want to give some pump up to Zalvitri, who's joined the Yahoo team this year, who does a lot of trade analysis and a lot of market analysis. And he's given out just flaming hot takes that are really good. So check him out. He's part of Fantasy Football Live as well. So I want to give a hearty recommendation to the work he's giving us this year.
Yes, hoping to have Sal on the podcast sometime here in the next few months or so. So, all right, with that, we're doing Sal talk, Sal praise, and we're doing damn trade analysis because we got some real skip-worthy teams in the skip category this week. Starting, Scott, with the Carolina Panthers at Miami Dolphins, who are 13.5 point favorites at home, 47.5 over under. It feels very ridiculous and sacrilegious to have the Dolphins in the skip category, but that is how down bad the Panthers are, where it's basically play Adam Thielen and nothing else.
Yes, the question here is, are any of the non-starting running backs or the non-featured running backs worth it here or long-term to Chuba Hubbard push Miles Sanders? He's been the better player right now.
Oh, I don't even know, man. It's all BS, like check down stuff in garbage time.
Maybe, yeah, that's totally possible. So maybe we skip to the other side of it. Miami, about a 2-touchdown favorite in this game. You think they're going to have a game script. Unfortunately, the very exciting Achane is gone for a IR stints. That's at least a month. So at what point does Wilson get back? At what point does maybe Ahmed get some run? We know how they like Raheem Mostert for 10 touches, 12 touches, 15 touches. That's who he is. He's never going to be a bell cow. So if you're desperate, game script, the player Brown is getting some run off on special teams, but sometimes getting run in the offense. There's somebody's going to pop here. An unexpected Miami player is going to pop, and I wish I could point you to one specific guy. And I know it's a cheat to mention multiple guys, but at least look at this backfield and see if there's a speculation play you can make.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest learning lesson from the Dolphins. I hope to see Jalen Waddle get back in like some schemed touches here, because most of that has gone to Achane, and they're not taking anything away from Tyreek Hill. So hoping that this could be a spot for Jalen Waddle against a team that's had a lot of injuries in the secondary. Moving on to the second game in the skip here. I mean, this is the unsubscribed New England Patriots going to Las Vegas to take on the Raiders, who are 2.5 point favorites with a real nice 41.5 over under. I'd love to put the Patriots completely in the unsubscribed category, Scott, because I think we're both in agreement. Ain't nothing going on there. But the Raiders do have some guys we are very interested in fantasy.
Is there an unsubscribe category? There should be. Like last year, we tried to unsubscribe from the Broncos. I couldn't process it. I tried. Patriots have unsubscribe written all over them. Isn't it funny that the Raiders, you know who their big guys are, but doesn't Jacoby Myers have a great rapport going with Jimmy G? When Jacoby Myers plays a full game, the numbers are there. Wouldn't the Patriots love to have, Bob Lobel, the longtime New England sportscaster, used to have a joke that whenever anybody who was on the local team went to a different team and played well, he'd always say, why can't we get guys like this? And I'm sure Bob Lobel will say, why can't we get guys like Jacoby Myers, who settled into a very bankable, projectable role for the Raiders? I'm curious. We don't like the Raiders defense generally. It played a very inspired game Monday night. And part of that was Jalen Love, struggling right now, and they didn't have Aaron Jones and all that. But the Patriots offense is struggling as much as anybody's in football. And maybe we all owe apologies to Patricia and Judge, because Bill O'Brien has not magically fixed anything. Mac Jones looks so bad. I'm at the point now where I'd be fine just to not play Jones, throw Zappe out there, see if he's a lifetime backup that you might want to keep, and do as bad as you can and hope that you get lucky in the draft. I think most Patriot fans are at that point. Jacoby Myers isn't even a start-sit call anymore. He's an automatic play. I think the Las Vegas Raiders, we like to think of them as Max Crosby and 10 guys. I think they're a good defensive stream against New England right now.
Max Crosby could put up 10 fantasy points against this team just on his own.
He could,
right? I mean,
I love that guy. Man, talk about somebody who great. Most NFL players play hard, but Max Crosby plays like it's the last play of his career on every snap.
You're so right to point out with Jacoby Myers too, and this is what I pointed out. Like, obviously, when he went to the Raiders in free agency, everybody kind of groaned, and yeah, I had some higher hopes for Jacoby to land somewhere else. But tell you what, man, he like the Jimmy G routes. Those are the ones that Jacoby Myers runs. He runs. Yeah, he runs in that space. The throws that Jimmy G likes, the very definable throws. And he's gonna smash his ADP if he stays healthy. You obviously had that really scary hit on opening day against the Broncos, but he's come back no worse for wear. So let's play him aggressively. And you might have to play Stevenson, and that's okay if you do. Ugh.
The rest of the Patriots, man, you're not only you're not playing them. A lot of these guys you're just cutting. It's just let's cancel the season, man. They need to reboot. They need to wipe out the hard drive and start over.
Just last thing here, keep an eye on Michael Mayer. He ran more routes than Austin Hooper. Jimmy G could have hit him for a big play. He had a couple nice moments. He's someone at least to be interested in this offense right now. Gives you something to do if you have to watch this game for whatever reason. We are going to have to watch Sunday Night Football, Scott. But do we have to? The damn Giants are back on primetime, going to Buffalo to take on the Bills. The Bills are 14.5-point favorites despite dealing with a bunch of injuries right now, especially on defense. Matt Milano is out for the year. Deron Jones is out for the year. Tre'Davious White out for the year. Yet the Giants are somehow more banged up than them. Tyrod Taylor might get himself a revenge game here against the Buffalo Bills behind a tattered offensive line. How do the Bills not wipe the floor with the Giants here?
I can't give you a plausible solution to that unless it's like torrential downpour or something. To me, this game comes down to for fantasy. The auto plays. I'm not going to waste any time on that. Are you a DeMarco Murray garbage time guy? Are you a Damian Harris garbage time guy?
You mean Latavius Murray? Sorry.
Oh, okay. DeMarco Murray if he signs with the Bills between now and game day. But I would play anybody. I'd play Bill Murray against Buffalo Bill Murray. So what if you're looking for something, late garbage timey out of this Buffalo backfield, how are you going to play it?
I think it's Damian Harris because Murray has gotten on the field irritatingly to James Cook managers. He's gotten on the field in like the 2-minute drill and in passing situations because they think, remember Latavius Murray when he came into the league, he was like an athletic freak because he was huge and fast. Well, I don't know how fast he is at this point. Probably still pretty fast, but he's still huge. And they trust him in pass protection over James Cook. So he's gotten on the field in those situations. I think Harris, though, if they're salting this game away in the second half, would probably be the guy there.
It's going to be one of these things where people are going to say, remember when the Giants were a playoff team last year? They won a playoff game and we were all...
Remember when Brian Daboll was coach of the year?
Brian Daboll, man, is he going to go down one of those coach of the year guys who...
The Nagy route?
Yeah, the Nagy route. That's what I'm looking for. Is he the new Matt Nagy award winner? I mean, it's too early to say that definitively. And he hasn't a fair hand this year, so I get that. But I'd be very, very concerned. They thought they had their coach. They thought they had their quarterback. Of course, they really haven't upgraded the wide receiver room. I thought maybe it was an interesting move to get Waller tight end contract, but with wide receiver production, that hasn't worked out. And let me tell you where I'm at with Barkley. You can't really get down on a guy who's hurt. I mean, it's not his fault. Football is such a violent game and everything, but I don't even think healthy Barkley is anything more than just a good player. I don't think he's elite. I wouldn't if we knew he was going to be healthy the rest of the season, I still wouldn't take him in the first round.
Yeah, I thought he was more of a second round pick this year. I still think he's a great player. It's a rough offense, man. It's a rough offense.
Well, here's what I don't like. I felt like he was an explosive receiver early in his career. His receiving metrics, totally. And I know that some of the paths that you and I go down with receiving is a little bit different, and I have great respect for the work that you do at Reception Perception. James Coe is doing great work too. But Barkley doesn't scare. If I'm a defense and they throw a pass to Barkley, I'm like, so what? Okay,
yeah,
he's going to gain 4 yards. Totally. And we'll tackle him.
He's not like a Christian McCaffrey where he's going to be out there like running routes either, at this point. Or even like a Breece Hall. You throw Breece Hall like a swing pass.
Breece Hall scares me. Saquon Barkley does not scare me.
I think that's fair. And even, again, in this offense, like he's a guy that if he plays this week, you probably have to hate play him. But if they get completely bottle him up, you can't be surprised. One thing I'll say on Waller, he at least last week did get we line him up outside and give him real receiver routes where that was like the thing coming out of training camp. They were going to do that. Didn't see it to start the season. We at least saw it in garbage time against the damn Dolphins last week. They'll probably be in garbage time here against the Bills. Gabe Davis, I'll credit Gabe Davis, man. He is emerging, I think, as an every week play at this point. I mean, he's going to have
garbage time starts in this game. It starts at kickoff and Gabe Davis will do the Gabe Davis. He'll only catch 3 passes, but one of them will be a touchdown.
All right, I think we've said enough about Sunday Night Football. We'll have to recap it, Scott, or maybe I'll suffer through it and give you the night off if you want to.
No, I'm here. I'm here to share the pain, and we'll talk about something will go right. And we'll talk about that. But man, where would you rather be on a Sunday, man? NFL, here it comes. Let's do it.
Let's do it, man. Can't wait for another big week here in week 6. Is going to be awesome. Some of these games are really, really interesting, and some of these games feature the New England Patriots. All right, that is going to do it for us today. Be sure to tune in first thing Monday morning, like I said, to hear Scott and I break down all of the action from week 6. Until then, we're out.